sisters all over this land.
It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good Saturday afternoon. In case you haven't noticed, changed the theme music. Somebody suggested maybe I ought to go with that one. It might represent better. So we're going to drop off the hammer time, and we're going to go to If I Had Me a Hammer. Next week, we're actually going to have a different version of it. Going to be a little bit more hip-hop to it. So I think we'll settle on it for a while, and hopefully you'll like the intro. But we've got some important things to talk about today. I do want to thank you for joining me on the Kim Hammer Show. One thing I want to remind you is that if you want to go back up and get any information, or if I share from time to time, then I'm going to put information on the website. It's www.thekimhammershow.com, thekimhammershow.com, and you can follow me on Facebook, and we do put up interesting articles that I think would be of, as I said, interest to you, so you can follow me along on the website there. If you're interested in supporting the show, want to advertise, give me a holler. We are doing a push out of our social media, including, doing some individual episodes, so if you're interested in that, just send me a message through the website. All right, today we have in studio Leslie Bellamy with the Secretary of State. She's been on the show before, and also Daniel Shults. Daniel, your official title is with the
State Board of Election Commissioners. I serve as the director.
Very good, and we're going to have on at the end of the show R.J. Hawk, who was successful in winning the primary down in Saline County in the newly elected district that's representative primarily of Bryant, a little bit over toward Alexander, Shannon Hills, and he'll be calling in toward the end of the show. But it's going to be good to have you all on, because now that the election has concluded, and I know there's some wrap-up business that has to be done, and also we've got some runoffs that are going to be taking place, that we would talk about some of the things that occurred and, just kind of do a pulse check on how the election process went. So with Daniel being over the State Board of Elections and would be investigating any of the complaints that might come in, and with Leslie being with the Secretary of State's office, having overall arching responsibility to oversee the elections, thought it'd be good to have them in. Let me start off with you, Leslie. First of all, just go ahead and, even though maybe a little self-serving, but go ahead and tell us what the reaction of the Secretary of State's office is as far as how this election cycle went.
We were actually pretty pleased. We had some of the quite normal problems in counties, but overall we went home very early. The counties, I think, did overall a wonderful job. We had a bigger turnout than what we expected. We had around 457,000 voters, with 347,000 being Republican votes and about 95,000 being Democrat, probably leaving around 2,000 as the non-partisan. So we did have a bigger, busier cycle than we expected, especially the last 3 days.
Comparison-wise, how does that compare to previous years on the primary?
It's probably about 100,000 more than the last, race with the governor and all the constitutionals. And as well, it's the biggest Republican turnout in 25 years I've ever seen.
And I know y'all be a little bit limited to some of the comments that I say, given the positions that you're in, so just sit there and stare for a second. But one thing I think that maybe drove the numbers up is the fact that we had some big ticket races. We had some constitutional races, that were going on. Some big names that drew out some, I think, increased the numbers, whether it was, Sarah for the governor's race, Tim for the AG's race. You just go on down the line, the lieutenant governor's race especially, with as many candidates. Can y'all think of a time that we had as many candidates in the lieutenant governor's race than we did this time?
I cannot in all of my career, and I am also happy to say there's not a statewide runoff in that for selfish reasons, but usually with that many candidates, there's a runoff.
Right, and by selfish reasons, you mean because you guys don't have to work it.
We won't do a statewide runoff.
I want to clarify that. I don't want you to get in trouble here or anything. Now, so, as far as the turnout, it was an excellent turnout. I also think, maybe, personal perspective, that perhaps some of that is driven by the fact that Republicans have been gearing up for 2 years for this opportunity. Y'all don't have to say anything. And, that Republicans wanted to show up in force, not only to support their candidates, but also, I think, just to make sure that if there was any kind of shenanigans or anything that we experienced in the last election cycles, we could at least overpower with the numbers in the event something happened, that we could have shared numbers that showed up. One of the things also we've been, preaching on this show as well as some other shows, and that is just the integrity of the process, that people need to feel confident in the process. I actually put up a report on my website this past week, a report that came out March of 2022 regarding some investigations in other states dealing, with the Dominican machines. And to that point, Daniel, do you know, or either one of y'all, do y'all know of any issues that occurred that you've heard of so far that dealt with anything regarding, and let's keep it just to the voting machines themselves?
Well, thank you, Senator. There are certainly an issue we try to keep a very close eye on. I feel like we were as proactive and as aggressive as we ever have been. We did have, I believe it was 3 voters who reached out that had concerns regarding whether the ballot marking devices correctly rendered their selections. And we were able to, in all 3 cases, actually send state staff to the field to test all of the voting machines in those affected polling sites, and all of them tested were found to be working and in proper order. And just kind of our conclusion regarding to that is, I think, is actually, unfortunately, maybe a solution to a prior problem, maybe for a few voters caused some confusion, that there are now 3 columns rather than 1. If you remember in the 2020 general election, you actually had to scroll to a second page to see all the presidential candidates, and that was a challenge that we didn't want voters to have to do. But by having 3 columns, I think there were some instances, and there was also a little indicator of what your selection was. I think some people were trying to push that little box and maybe bumping the column adjacent to it, and that's ultimately what our conclusion has been to date regarding that issue. But it is our finding has been that the machines work correctly, and we have again, we've literally sent people to the machines to test them, 2 cases the same day, and the 3rd case, because of geography, and when it was reported, it was the next day, and found them in working order.
Yeah, actually, I've got a letter, I think, that you sent me up on my website, thekimhammershow.com, stating what the results of that was, that when you went out there, which I appreciate the prompt response. I think, for all the hype, give, take, or whatever, I think the extra precaution, the extra attention that's being given whenever there is suspicion of a complaint is good, because the quicker you can get out there and dispel that and investigate it, the safer people feel about their voting right. I was working on pulling up some numbers, because there is, a hotline number that you can call to the AG. I'll just read you off some of these numbers. Updated election integrity numbers as of today, after conclusion of the 2022 primary: 86 voicemails, 74 pertain to scam calls, requests for legal advice, or simply express an opinion on social and political matters, so you can check them off. They don't apply. 8 pertain to how or when to vote, polling location, hours of operation, etc., and were routed either to the Secretary of State, County Clerk, or County Election Commission. 4 pertain to general questions of election law, campaign signs, etc., and were routed to the State Board of Election Commissions, which I presume you've got those. You may be able to talk to them, may not. 30 online complaint submissions. 18 pertain to scam calls, requests for legal advice, simply express opinion. 12 are spam submissions, likely to be computer, often contain links to computer viruses, and 0 official complaints submitted regarding election law violations. I think that's the number we wanted to hear, is 0. But now you can receive complaints directly to the State Board of Elections, right?
That's correct. And I will also say that having that hotline was a useful resource, because, and like in these instances we were discussing, one of the things we did was contact the Attorney General and say, hey, we've had this, or if it was a systematic problem, you would expect to see more than just 3 voters reporting to us. And so we were able to ask them, are you seeing this? And they weren't, so that was useful as well.
It happens. When it's live radio, it happens. So,
what was the second half of the question?
Well, the second half of the question is, did you receive any yourself that came from maybe outside the Attorney General's hotline number that
yes,
up
sir.
for
Okay.
investigation?
And of course, we have I mentioned the few on that issue. You do have 30 days from the certification of the election in your county in order to file a complaint with us. So if you believe an election law was violated, or you have a concern that what you observe might be a violation of election law, you have plenty of time to contact our office and to report that and start an official complaint if that's what's needed. And you can find the complaint form on our website. I'll go ahead and give that, which is www.arkansas.gov/SBEC, or you can just call us at 1-800-422-6996. But as I said before, we obviously get lots of concerns, lots of issues. There's lots of process, lots of rules. I mean, the election laws are quite, it provides for a thick book. But as far as, I'm not aware of any issues that would call into question the integrity of the election process or the equipment.
Nothing that would cause you to feel like any votes were stolen or anything of that nature, right?
No, sir.
All right, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get it put up on my website where you can go and you can have that information for future reference, or, maybe, and I would also say this, you may not want to hear this, but, if you got a suspicion about something, go ahead and call it in, send it in, because it's better for people to have peace of mind. And I don't think your system is going to get overloaded with everything that we've done to try to secure election, integrity. But personally, I would rather people go ahead and send something in, let you investigate it, let you look at it, because you have hired on more investigators, or in the process of getting more hired on based on what we did this last time.
That's correct, and I absolutely echo that. If you have any concerns about something you experienced, you absolutely should reach out to us. You absolutely should file a complaint. And we did expand our capacity after the last session in order to be able to better handle these, and we'll continue to do whatever we need to do to ensure that any concerns by Arkansans are addressed.
All right, let's come back to this for a second, but let me ask you, Leslie, so election's over, numbers are in, now what?
We have several runoffs in the state. Like I mentioned, we don't have a statewide runoff. There are some legislative slots that have runoffs. A lot of county positions have runoffs. So they immediately will start coding on those. They'll certify this election by June 8th. And then by July 14th, they'll start early voting. Early voting for a runoff is only 7 days with no extended hours and no Saturdays. And by June 21st, we'll know the winners of those runoffs.
As far as like anybody that would want to, because I know there were a couple of races out there that were close, might be some potential recounts out there. Educate us as far as what the process is if somebody wanted to challenge or wanted to recount, and the time frame it has to be done in.
Well, by 48 hours after the exposure of the unofficial results, somebody would have to file the request for a recount, and then there is a process to pay for the recount. So by, depending on when your county finished up, you would need 48 hours after that, you would have to file that request.
We're pretty well there, aren't we?
We're getting close.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, if your county were to have certified its unofficial results on election night, that would mean it would be the end of day today. But the end of, well, that would be, we're already past it.
Yes.
We'll talk about the certification process just to give people an understanding what that means. So, the election night's done, the votes tallied, you get you get what you think are the official results, but they're really official at what point?
Well, provisional ballots where somebody might not have had ID with them, they can cure that until Monday. Well, actually, it'll be Tuesday because of Memorial Day. They can cure their ballot with that and it be counted. And there's also additional 10 days for UOCAVA ballots to be received. That's the Uniformed Overseas Military and Citizens. So those ballots might come in. So that's why we call those unofficial results. There could be some more ballots counted. It probably won't, be a huge amount, but those can still have that time to be tabulated and brought into the results.
Another important thing to remember is if your ballot was made provisional during the process of voting for any reason unrelated to the ID, for instance, maybe there was a dispute over whether which ballot was the correct ballot or a challenge to your vote, there'd be a meeting held that's set by your county election commission, and you would have been given notice of when that is in the poll if it applies to you. That would also have to be concluded prior to the 10 days. And another, I think, might be helpful for your viewer or your listeners to to understand is while and we all love the election night reporting system because we can sit at home at night and refresh it and see what's coming up very quickly. The legal certification of the election happens 10 days later, and there are steps that have to be taken to ensure that those electronic records were accurate, and we believe they are, but it's important to know that the actual legal certification of the election is based on paper records created at the polling site, not on the transmission of any sort of electronic records. The legal records that form the basis of the certification are created in the poll or in the central count, if like you're counting absentee ballots, and are never from that point on exposed or at any point exposed to the internet, but never otherwise exposed to technology. So that's a safeguard that's actually been in place in our elections for a long time.
And that's actually an election law that requires the county boards of commissions to compare that electronic set back to their ballot count and their handwritten voter list. That's all another step to ensure that everything's counting correctly.
The certification process, though, takes place after all of that. So did you say 10 days? Is that right?
Certification is the very last thing, and it has to occur no later than 10 days after the election.
So do you ever know at any certain point in time how many provisional votes are out there in any given race throughout the state?
We collect that data on election night from the counties, if they have it. Most of them do, rarely have it, and we actually input that in so that what our expectations are.
So are you at liberty to say how many provisional votes there are out there?
I did not pull that data before I came. I would be able to if I had them pull that data, but I did not.
Okay, and what I'm wondering is, if it's a close race, so you got, you've got a chance to get a recount
Yes.
within 48 hours. And if you didn't do a recount, or you had a race that was close, I think I'm remembering there's a race out there somewhere that's like, separated by 3 votes. I think I'd want to do the recount. But let's just say you didn't want to pay for the recount, you didn't have the money to pay for the recount, and then it comes in after the fact that something doesn't match up before the 10-day. Could somebody actually end up winning the race without having to go through the recount? Or am I confusing it?
Possibly, if there's enough provisionals or UOCAVA's
That's
outstanding.
Right. And so I think one nuance we left off was if they're only ballots that can come in after the election are those that are sent either outside the territorial limits of the United States or to active duty uniformed service members. And so if there were enough of those out there to affect the outcome, essentially the number of UOCAVA ballots exceeds the margin, then that time to ask for a recount is delayed. So then it's not 2 days, it's however long it takes to get those ballots back.
Right. But you're able to know that by county, by precinct, right
Yes.
down to the individual
Yes, sir.
race. So somebody that is in that position would know that, hey, it's worth the recount or it's worth waiting because there's that many that are out there.
Yes, and the provisionals are known as well, so you know the universe right now, or can find out from your county or from the secretary.
We passed a lot of laws this past time to increase the integrity, and on that point, I know that the Heritage Foundation ranked us as the 4th safest state to vote in, which is a great credit. And I know the Secretary of State, on the things that kept us from being number 1, are working or have already gotten those things taken care of that would allow us maybe to move up in the rankings. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're working on some of the issues that I want to say they kind of dinged us on. And, the rankings for the Heritage are something that they're the more conservative rankings, and you'll see our rankings lower in some other areas, but it's, maybe not areas we want to be ranked high in, like, drop boxes and all-mail voting and things. So, yes, Heritage voted Arkansas as number 4, primarily due to the legislative changes that you guys put into place this time.
So with regards to, like, absentee ballots, this time around, we, cut it off early, that they had to be turned in, I think, by Friday before election, 5 o'clock. Any measurable impact that you two can speak to as to whether or not that had any bearing on the election at all, or how many are left hanging out there that maybe were requested but weren't turned in?
We don't really have the not turned in data yet. We only had one complaint on that, but it really wasn't the new law that would have prevented them from being able to vote. They just waited too late to pick up a ballot, period. So I don't see that it probably disenfranchised anyone from having the ability to, get their absentee and get it turned in timely.
Yeah, which is one of the points I want to bring out. Y'all may just want to sit silent on this editorial for a second. There's a lot of pushback whenever we pass some of these laws that were designed to increase the integrity of the vote. And that is one distinction I wanted to bring out, is that for all the concern and all the fear-mongering that was given during testimony when we were running these integrity bills, has, it appears, in this election cycle, not proven to have any of the negative effects that they were concerned about. Voter turnout, that's one of the things, that is, maybe I'll speak to this, but that is one thing with the high number that turned out. If these bills were so suppressive, we wouldn't have had the turnout that we did. And the fact that we had the huge turnout that we did tells me that the bills that we were able to get through with some opposition from those whose intentions I think may have been questionable, that it has proven not to have been what they were so concerned about.
I agree with that. I didn't see any decline in the request, and I didn't see any decline or much confusion or complaints about the absentee process.
Okay. Daniel?
And also, I was thinking that one thing we also didn't hear was any complaints about any issues with voters lacking support. As you'll recall, in 2020, there were concerns about entities that had tried to set up, I'll call them presents or a table or a booth or what have you, right next to the door to the poll, inside the area where anyone else is allowed to be, and that was what also in that legislative agenda that you had put forward, and we had no concerns along that line in this election, so that seemed to have addressed that problem.
Well, and somebody, and I don't know if you...
With no complaints to the contrary that it was a problem.
That's great. There was and I don't know if you can speak to this, but there was a case where somebody in the last several months was identified as electioneering or participating in electioneering within that 100-foot. I think that individual was dealt the appropriate action or punishment, if you would. And so hopefully the message is getting out there, maybe evident by the fact you had no complaints, that people realize when you get inside that 100-foot zone, that's a sacred zone. Don't do anything that would harass. In the polling sites that I drove around and saw, as big of a turnout, did you have any complaints? I didn't get any complaints about people having to wait long in line. I know down in Saline County, by the 7th day, they had already exceeded in early voting the turnout in 2018. And with the increased numbers the way it is, the fact that people were able to flow through, I have not heard any complaints about anybody having to wait in long lines to vote. Did y'all get any?
Not to my knowledge. I didn't hear any of the staff talking about it either, that they were complaining about having to wait. I think, the new equipment, I think, helps move them on efficiently, and I think the poll workers in our counties and our county clerks and commissioners do a good job of setting up the polls. So I think it all went very smooth from what I heard.
I agree. I don't recall hearing any complaints along that line, and that's one of the great things about our system. Those sorts of decisions are made at the local level, and the local folks have the best handle on what their county's needs are, and I think work diligently to accommodate those needs.
I do know there was a lot more training put into poll watchers, election, workers, and I do want to give this shout out. I want to give a shout out to everybody that worked the polls. That is kind of a thankless job in a way, but yet it is a very rewarding job. And I want to give a shout out to all the poll workers, everybody that pulled this election off. And, whether you're Republican or Democrat, the one thing we all agree upon, and that is you want an election that when it's all said and done, you may have won, you may have lost, but as long as you won or lost square and fair, that's all you can ask for. And as long as the system is the integrity of the system is being protected to where we can all have that sense of security, then may the best team win and get out there and do your job. But to all the poll workers, I want to give a shout out. We're going to take a break here in a minute. I also want to give a shout out to another group, and that is, this is Memorial Day weekend. It's not 4th of July weekend. It's not Labor Day weekend. It is Memorial Day weekend. It's the weekend that we stop and pause and say thank you to the men and women who have given their lives, in line of duty, and I know it applies 99.9% to the military, but I also don't want to forget the law enforcement officers and those other peacekeepers that keep the peace at home. So for all of those that have given their life or put themselves on the line, we want to say thank you, because quite honestly, if it wasn't for what the folks did that we honored this weekend, our elections wouldn't be what they are, and we wouldn't be able to sit here and have this talk over the airways as freely as we do. So I want to give a shout out to everybody and say thank you to our military personnel, and we recognize you this weekend on Memorial Day weekend. You're listening to the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM. The Answer. We'll be back in just a little bit and continue our conversation, and then we're going to have R.J. Hawk call in here in just a little bit, and we'll talk to the newly elected representative down there. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for joining me here on this beautiful Saturday. And if you want to go up to the show and get a replay or get some of the information, we'll get the website and the phone number that Daniel referenced a while ago. Daniel is with the State Board of Election, and he is the one that handles the investigations and also does the training and a whole bunch of other stuff that we throw on him legislatively to do. And we've got Leslie Bellamy with Secretary of State office in, and we're talking about this last election cycle. You go up to thekimhammershow.com in order to get a replay of today or to be able to get any of the information that we're talking about sharing today. So, Daniel, let me ask you, you're the one that, ultimately gets the complaints, got to go out and investigate everything you referenced a couple while ago. As far as systematic, with the machines or with the paper ballot process, or what was the overall results from individual counties, and were there any other hiccups that, we need to be concerned about?
Thank you, Senator. One of the things I did want to mention was just some of the elements of resiliency of our election system and how they came into effect in this last election. In Washington County, they actually, unfortunately, had a power outage that affected their courthouse and at least one of their polls, and managed to deal with that problem without any break in the operation of their voting equipment or the voting services. They had to, the equipment all has internal power backups, and so all the equipment, the ballots were available, and they rushed some generators over to their clerk's office to keep the clerks available for the few things you've got to contact the clerk's office to have that work, and so I thought that was impressive. Another thing, there are a few issues always. This is a large operation full of humans, and though one of those was there was a county where they had that handy little device that quickly reports the votes was they didn't meet the poll workers, or somehow it was misplaced. But I think that's important to know that the system is designed to handle those sorts of situations. What they had was the ballots, and they had those certified results I was talking about earlier. So while there was a bit of convenience loss, there was absolutely no negative impact to the vote count. There's another county where there's a little bit issue reading in the results that caused some delays, but because you have the paper ballots and you have the paper certified results, no issues about delays or technical issues are ever going to impact the vote count or knowing what the vote count is. And if there's ever any doubt about that, you can have a recount. And another thing we could mention is if there's ever any issues, sometimes the commissions of their own accord will just have a recount in order to confirm, and that's actually what they did in this instance with the USB drive. They just went ahead and recounted the original ballots to confirm that everything was correct. Just going the extra mile so everyone can see that these elections are transparent. There's records to back up the votes that are permanently kept, or kept for several years at least, and that and that you have the opportunity for recounts, you have redress in the courts, and that every piece of the ballot counting process is open to the public and open to poll watchers and to candidates to ensure everything is done the way it should be. And that's another reason why we're here, is to provide both analysis and oversight if anyone in those processes that are open to the public feels that something needs to be investigated or addressed.
How many investigations do you have even at this point that you got to conclude from this election cycle?
I believe, last time I looked, I think we've received about a dozen formal complaints, and I haven't, some of those we've analyzed, and some of those will be analyzed in the next few days. I saw one as I walked out the door to come over here, but that's normal. And those can range from, serious allegations of election fraud or some sort of, people are concerned about that kind of an issue, to simple, the poll worker, I don't think the poll worker checked me into the poll right, but they were still allowed to vote. So those range in scope and will most certainly be investigated. They'll be analyzed, and everyone that, if you assume what they said in the report is true, would constitute a violation of an election law, we are required and will investigate it.
So if you're at liberty to say nothing that would rise to the level that would indicate that an election was stolen or it's going to alter the outcome of any election that occurred? No.
The only, and maybe I articulated that not in the best way, the only indications at all that even come close to that would be attempts, but none of them are alleged to have been successful. And I don't think, nothing that would give me concern about the outcome.
Yeah, and that's not to say that there's, as long as you got humans involved in a process, you're always going to have the temptation to do something wrong or, steal, fraudulent, whatever the case may be. And that's just going to happen. I don't care how many laws we pass. It's kind of like I saw, a statement on Facebook, we can pass all the laws we want, but that's not going to stop evil, because the heart of people are evil at the core. You just hope that the good outweighs the evil. But, the fact that something may or may not happen, A, as long as it didn't cost somebody the election, B, as long as they're investigated, and if they have done something that's illegal, they will be persecuted too, that's okay, but prosecuted, to where they can't be involved in the election process in the future. That's about the best you can hope for.
Well, and another thing that's worth mentioning is one of the benefits of the voter ID law, because if there's any real issue you have to keep a close eye on, it's absentee voting. I think that's pretty obvious, given you're voting and you're not in the presence of the election officials. But the great thing is now, and we have a law that requires you to have an ID. We've always required you to analyze the signature, and so even if someone were to try to do something in absentee voting, there are a lot of tools that we have in Arkansas that would allow the County Election Commission to detect whether the voter was in fact, and 99 times out of 100 the voter is that's a good ballot, but we do pay attention to those in Arkansas, and we do analyze them and have some tools to detect any efforts at fraud in that area.
You bring up an interesting point, because I'm replaying in my mind all the bills that we passed last session. One of them was about the signature verification, and I mean, we heard all sorts of things, and those lawsuits are still hanging out there. They just got they just got stopped by the court through this, and that still has to be dealt with. I can't help but believe, and maybe I'm off out on a limb, you can't talk about it, but, I can't help but believe that, given the fact that we had as successful of a election cycle as we did, and there are no complaints that I've heard of as far as somebody saying, well, my signature didn't match. That was one of the things that they argued, in their case, was that, well, maybe I signed my signature at 18 and now I'm 98, my signature doesn't match. And there's plenty of ways to resolve that, throughout the course of a person's lifetime. But I just find it amazing that for everything that everybody argued was going to happen, that it appears that if it did, it was so minimal that it hasn't risen to the level that it's gotten, even attention of the press. Right. So just make that observation that sometimes people like to get in front of committees and fearmonger, and reality proves out later that it's not reality. One question, no missing ballots floating around out there, because last time around we had a box or two show up later. We have none of that stuff that we know of.
Haven't heard anything to that, and counties are balancing, so to our knowledge, none of that's happened.
And again, that's the important part about the certification process. That gives you that, everything's rushed on election night. It's a long day. That's why we take our time and we make sure all of these things are addressed, and we have time to find them and solve them if a problem comes up. But no, I'm not aware of any missing ballots or anything of that nature.
Okay. One thing too, in one of the reports I saw out there in some previous conversations with Clint Lancaster, went up to Wisconsin, did the investigation up there. As far as our machines being hooked up to the internet and that kind of stuff, where they could go in and do any manipulation, we don't have machines that do any of that. And in fact, one of the laws we passed was it's forbidden to hook the machine up to the internet now.
Yes, sir, and that's one of the things I was glad to see. It's something I would have never been for as long as I'm Director of Elections for the Secretary of State. The Secretary actually had the vendor come in and allowed him to examine the machines and explain to us about the modems that are in other states. So there's no way for any of that. And also, one of the things that I tell voters daily is they want us to go back to paper ballots, and we're absolutely on the epitome of a paper ballot system. Within the marker itself, you can verify who you voted for. There's a review screen, and then the paper ballot actually comes back out in your hand. Yep. So I think Arkansas has a very secure system, and we have the audits in place, so I feel secure about Arkansas elections.
And that's a good point. And I know some people I've had ask, well, why do we even mess with the marking devices? And I think that might be worth asking. Well, Arkansas has one of the most complicated elections in the world. In fact, I'm aware of none more complicated. There are actually 6,741 variations of the ballot that could exist. That's an average of 90 per county. So the benefit of the marking device is by setting it up where your ballot, the correct ballot, pulls up automatically. Over half the counties have vote centers, which is great because a voter can go to any place to vote and get their ballot. But that also means every ballot has to be at that poll. So if you have a poll worker, a human, trying to choose from 100 piles of paper, and that's times 3 in a primary.
Absolutely.
That is a potential for error, and we saw error. So the ballot marking devices serve a very important function, but at the same time, we have all the benefits of a paper ballot, because that ballot, it has no memory. You have a piece of paper with your votes written in English that you can compare. And the other important problem that solves is, did you fill in the bubble right? We don't want you to have to, this isn't a test about how well you fill in a bubble, so that completely eliminates those voter intent questions as well by using a marking device. So there is an important reason for them, but none of that, there's no trade-off because we have as far as a paper ballot, because it is a paper ballot. Once it's printed out, it's a paper ballot.
The best of both worlds is what I would say. I know when I went to vote, it was as simple as you could get. I walked in, showed my ID, they did what they did. Plenty of workers gave me the slip, went over, pulled up the screen. I never felt like anybody was, looking over my shoulder. I didn't feel like there was even any opportunity to do that. Went in and, put it in and just went down and did it, put the paper in, did it. It was about as easy as you could. And in an election where you had as many people being voted on in a primary like this,
yes,
I felt very secure. So, all right, any last minute thoughts?
I just want to thank everyone that got out and voted and continue to do so. It's all right.
Okay, and give us the dates again on the primary, on the
runoff. July 14th, we'll start early voting. It's 7 days. It's the regular hours of the county clerk's office, no Saturdays. And June 21st, 7:30 to 7:30 will be the runoff day.
That won't apply to everybody?
No, not everybody.
Yeah, pay attention to where you vote. Make sure you probably know where it is. And I'm going to say this in conclusion. You need to get out and vote in the runoff. Yes. An election is important no matter whether it's the primary, the runoff, the general, whatever the case may be. And I'm afraid that some people, by historical numbers, don't get involved in the runoffs. And they are as important as any other election. So I hope that everybody, if you've got one in your area, that you will pay attention to it, and you owe it to yourself, and this is Memorial Day weekend, you owe it to those that have given their lives so we can enjoy the freedoms that we do. Pay respect to them, by getting out to vote. Anything else?
Just thank all the voters. I definitely want to echo your thoughts in thanking the election officials. And reminder that if you have anything you're concerned about, please contact the State Election Commission. We serve the people of Arkansas, and we're here to help address whatever concerns they may have. So they should definitely reach out to us either via our website or 1-800-411-6996.
Okay, we'll get that up on the KimHammerShow.com website, and you can go up there and have it just for safekeeping. Thank you all for being in the studio today. Y'all are welcome to sit here, but I got RJ on the phone. RJ, thank you for calling in today to the Kim Hammer Show.
Thank you, Senator. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You caught your breath yet?
Yeah, I tell you what, I got a little bit of a nap yesterday, but had to get back to the grind and get back to work, and hey, look, I am blessed that the people of Bryant, Shannon Hills, and Alexander trusted in me enough to vote for me as the Republican nominee for District 81, and I tell you, it's just a huge honor. I've been in this community now for going on 11 years, and even before I got into politics, I've gotten involved with local charities and just have always tried to be involved in the Bryant area. And it was just a special moment on Tuesday night when that was even confirmed more by the voters voting for me to represent them, be the conservative voice at the legislature.
Well, and people may remember or may not remember, this isn't your first rodeo. The first time you just got bucked off, but this time you were able to ride it out to the finish line. Just a little bit of a different experience for you this time than it was the first time. Just out of curiosity, to put you on a personal level, what were you going through election night as, and I've been there and other people, but I'm not sure people that have never run for an office understand what goes on in a person's head whenever it is that they're running for office. So I want to commend you and everybody that ran, because truth of the matter is you subject yourself to a lot of stuff. Part of that's just the emotional strain, the physical strain, juggling all the things you got to do in life. So just kind of walk it through a little bit of what it was like on election night for you, having one previous experience where you lost, but this time you won.
Well, Senator, I tell you this, it was there was a lot of nerves because, as you mentioned, I'd done this in 2020, and at the time I lost to who is now State Representative Keith Brooks. And what was really cool about this time, Keith actually came to my watch party with me, and we watched it together. And so we sat there and kind of reminisced a little bit, but as it started to tick down a little bit, they were having some issues posting the results on the Saline County Election Commission, or on the Saline County website to post the results. And so Doug Curtis, who has been an outstanding county clerk, he immediately started posting results on his Twitter account. So the early results came in. I saw it, and I was up like 56-43 or something like that, 44 on the early results, and so I felt pretty good. But you still had that one more barrier to go across, and that's the election day results. And so about 8:20, I checked the website. There was nothing. So then I looked on Twitter, and I saw that he posted it. Said all voting centers. Here's the numbers. And I sent him a text, and I said, are these the numbers? And I didn't hear back, and I waited about 10 minutes, and I was like, well, I hadn't heard back, and he's been posting other stuff. I think this is good to go. So if for those that don't remember, in 2020, whenever I lost, we were announced as the winner. The governor had called me and told me that I'd won. And so and then about 1 o'clock in the morning, the Pulaski County Election Commission called me and said, actually, you didn't win. We had 400 votes come in. And so I texted, didn't get a response, and so I go in and tell everybody, hey, we've won. I no more said that. Doug Curtis calls me, and he says, don't tell anybody those results on Twitter aren't correct. He said, we had a couple machines that need to be reset, and we've got to get an accurate count. So I had to go back in and tell everybody, actually, we didn't win yet. Just hold up. And I immediately started kind of having some PTSD moments, thinking, oh, my gosh, we're going through this again. And he called me. He called me 20 minutes later and said, we're good to go. Nothing changed. And then we went on to celebrate a win. And so it's just a range of emotions to be, real frank about it. You go, you have all your friends and family around, and and you're on, it's an emotional high, but if you lose, it's an emotional low. And luckily for me this time, we were able to get the win.
I sent you a text message. When it popped up on the TV screen, they had you checked off as the winner and everything. As soon as I hit that button, I thought, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have waited till in the morning just because of your previous experience. But you can't retrieve a text once you send it. So,
yeah, well, what's funny is I've got some great friends and some friends that are in the political world and some that are not. And I had a couple of them that I went to bed about 1:30, 2 o'clock, and I woke up to a text that said, hey, we just saw in the news that some more votes came in. And my heart dropped just for a moment the next morning, but then they followed it up with just kidding. So it was, I've got some great friends out there.
I was going to say, are you sure those were your friends that did that to you? But
Oh yeah, those are guys that like to mess with me a little bit. But hey, look, I'm a big believer. I know you're a pastor, but I'm a big believer that God has a plan for everybody. And when I lost in 2020, I didn't know it at the time, but Keith knew that district better than I did. I knew the Saline County part, but when it came to Pulaski County and a little bit of Perry County, Keith knew that area better than me. And so you fast forward in 2 years, and the district is redrawn because of the census, and I know this area as well as anybody, and so I'm a firm believer God has a plan for everybody, and this was his plan.
Well, one of the things you and I both believe, and that is God's timing is perfect. Last time, it wasn't your time, but this time it was. And so what are the future plans hold for you now that you kind of got this one under your belt?
Well, I've got to win in November.
That's right.
We've got an election in November that I'll have a Democrat and a Libertarian that I'm going against in November, and so we got to win that. But I feel really good about our campaign and what we did in the primary, and we're just going to extend that off into November. But I think like I've talked about on the Kim Hammer Show and other places, is that I want to support our police. That's one thing that's big for me. As a Bryant City Council member, I got our police and fire their first raise in 9 years in Bryant, and I commend the Senate this last session to be able to get a one-time fee out to all of our police officers across the state. I think that we need to find some type of formation where we can continue to do something like that for all of our law enforcement, and maybe even work on the retirement benefits, because of the fact that our police they're under attack right now across, maybe not so much in certain parts of Arkansas, but across the country in general. If you're a police officer, some people look at you and they don't think too kindly of you, and we need to back the blue as much as we can and show them that we want to protect them, and we want to protect their families the best we can from a financial standpoint. And so I'm going to be committed to that as long as I'm in the legislature. Very good.
Anything else you want to share?
No, I just, once again, I want to thank everybody that got out and voted, and I was very intrigued by the guests that you just had on. And I will say that I've got some friends that are in runoffs right now, and get out and vote, because that runoff is, those guys work so hard for that primary and then have to do a runoff, so they have to work extra hard, and they need folks to get out and run to vote and tell them who's going to move on, and if not that many people get out and vote, it's just you're not executing your right as a United States citizen. So get out and vote, and then get out and vote in November for R.J. Hogg for District 81.
Hey, let me ask you, you just hit on something with the previous guest that I had on. You were out and about, you were working all the poll sites and everything. Did you see anything at any of the poll sites that you were, I know you get out, you wave signs, do all that stuff. Did you see anything that alerted you to any issues out there?
No, I did not. And I'll tell you this, much like your experience, I actually, for the first time ever, I early voted. I'm normally a guy that waits until election day to vote, but because of the election that I was in, I said, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and get it out and get it done. And so I voted on the first day of early voting, and I timed it on my phone just so I could see how fast it was, and I could tell other people. I was in and out of the polling location in 4.5 minutes. From the time that I showed my ID and punched in the ballot, I was in and out in 4.5 minutes. And I know that there was there was one, well, my wife, for example. So my wife forgot to change her address when we moved. Now, it was all in the same district, but she forgot to change her address, and so she showed the ID, and the poll worker right then and there, they identified it. They took her off to the side and let her fill out a change of address form, and she got to vote, and it took her 3 minutes to do it. And so I got to commend I was at 6 different polling locations across Saline County. I got to commend the poll workers because they were efficient, and I thought it went really well.
Good news. That seems to be the message across state. You know, I know you got humans involved. You got potential for mistakes. You got those that are going to try to, take advantage of the situation, do things that are illegal against the law. But it would appear, for the most part, that our election has been very successful this time. And that is indeed to the poll workers, to the county clerks, and to all the people that are on the front line making it happen. And as you said a while ago, exercise your right as a U.S. citizen, a legal U.S. citizen, to get out there and to vote, because we have the rights we have because of the men and women that we honor this weekend, with it being Memorial Day. We want to respect the price that they paid so that we can enjoy the privileges that we do. RJ, any other words before I let you go?
Real quick, I want to say this, and because it doesn't get said very often, but I want to thank my opponent, Walter Burgess, who ran in my race. Oftentimes in elections, you get a lot of bad rhetoric. We didn't do that, but I think that as candidates, we all take a leap of faith and jump into this thing, and we do it. And sometimes you get negative, sometimes you don't. But I want to say thanks to Walter Burgess because he ran his race and I did mine, and you can only have one winner. But he's a great planning commissioner in the city of Bryant, and he'll be involved moving forward. So I just want to say that moving forward.
Well, y'all are 2 class acts, and the difficulty of elections is sometimes you got great candidates all condensed down to one race, but that's a good thing to have too. So, all right, I've got to wrap this thing up. RJ, thanks for joining me for a few minutes here on the Kim Hammer Show. Again, you go up to the website, thekimhammershow.com. That information Daniel was sharing with a while ago, we'll have it up there as well. And appreciate it. Don't forget to celebrate Memorial Day weekend, remembering those that gave their lives and put themselves in harm's way so we can enjoy the freedoms we do. We salute each and every one of y'all. Have a great day.